But I get it now. He's got new friends and they bring new views. It's celebrity peer pressure. But the fact that he hasn't left his house in 2 years means that his views are BS. He was in a happy self-imposed lockdown with everything. Mansion on the beach, limitless options for food and entertainment. That's not real life. That's a 2-year all-inclusive vacation at Sandals Royal Barbados. Which is impossible for everyone else in lockdown, including, especially, his listeners. Hell, he was doing his show from home. Does that make sense?
Well, I know some of them, and like Howard, I was on Howard Stern's show as much as anybody, and
yeah.
he was great at that time, and then he went woke.
Yeah.
And since he's gone woke, his ratings have gone down the tube.
And once the self-proclaimed king of shock jocks, Howard Stern now looks like a dethroned monarch, clinging to his faded crown, only to have Greg Gutfeld rip it clean off and toss it into the gutter. With Trump's show-killing move as the spark, Gutfeld turns the flames into a roaring inferno, shredding Stern's ego, legacy, and desperate grasp on relevance with surgical precision.
She also appeared on Howard Stern, where he said he'd even vote for a wall over Trump. Harris replied, "I'm not a wall, but I am plastered."
Howard Stern is a name I haven't heard. I used to do a show, we used to have fun, but I haven't heard that name in a long time. What happened? He got terminated?
Yeah, they're going to separate ways because I think what they're offering salary-wise is real low than what he's getting.
You know when he went down?
Whenever you want.
You know when he went down? No, before. When he endorsed Hillary Clinton, he lost his audience.
Right.
People said, give me a break. He went down when he endorsed Hillary Clinton.
When President Donald Trump decided to pull the plug on Howard Stern's show, the media reacted as if civilization itself had ended. But for Greg Gutfeld, it was the perfect punchline waiting to be delivered. The once legendary radio icon had become a bitter, paper-thin caricature, straining to prove he still mattered in a world that had long moved on. Gutfeld didn't just tease Stern, he swung a sledgehammer at the myth, pointing out that Trump's decision merely spotlighted what people had quietly known for years. Stern's edge had vanished more than a decade ago, leaving nothing but a hollow performance frantically chasing relevance.
Announced that he was leaving his show. Howard Stern announced that he and Sirius XM Radio are parting ways. Do you think the hate Trump business model that's been in the entertainment business is going out of business because it's not popular with the American people?
Well, it hasn't worked, and it hasn't worked really for a long time, and I would say pretty much from the beginning.
In the follow-up, Gutfeld barely even lingered on Trump's role. The real roast was aimed squarely at Stern himself, the man who built an empire on being unapologetically outrageous, only to morph into a sanitized, overpaid therapist for his celebrity pals. Greg painted him as a one-time rebel who traded in his leather jacket for a cardigan, now spending more time protecting his famous friends than ever challenging them. The once infamous king of all media, Gutfeld quipped, has been reduced to the hall monitor of all media, wagging his finger at anyone who dares step outside his carefully guarded, politically approved comfort zone.
You should hear what keeps him up at night.
This is what keeps me up at night. I don't understand how my fellow Americans, I don't even understand how this election is close. And yes, I'm voting for you, but I would also vote for that wall over there.
Well, he's half right. We do need a wall. To keep out gang members, fentanyl dealers, human traffickers, and Anna Navarro.
From there, the takedown turned merciless. Stern's shift from brash provocateur to politically correct mouthpiece wasn't some slow fade. It was a full-blown identity swap. Gutfeld skewered how Stern went from mocking self-important elites to practically joining their country club, sipping champagne with the very phonies he used to torch. The man who once thrived on roasting hypocrisy now nods along to the same pre-packaged opinions you could hear from any late-night host too timid to go off script. The edge that once made Stern dangerous has been dulled into a soft-serve version of truth. Smooth, safe, and guaranteed never to offend anyone powerful enough to push back.
But it is incredibly brave to take this stance after you've made $300, $400 million not being woke. right? Loving Donald Trump, exploiting the mentally ill, wearing blackface. Look at the crop of woke comics, whether it's Stern or Jimmy Kimmel, his BFF, Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, Michael Ian Black. What do they all have in common? They wore blackface. And then they went woke.
And when it came to hypocrisy, Gutfeld didn't just glance, he dug straight in. Here's a man who once bragged about never bowing to corporate overlords, now seemingly taking his cues from the same boardrooms he used to mock. For decades, Stern ridiculed sanitized morning radio, only to become the living embodiment of it himself, just with a fatter budget and even less charm. His interviews now resemble scripted therapy sessions for pampered celebrities whose PR teams already scrub their images spotless. The wild, unpredictable chaos that once defined him has vanished, replaced by the cautious blandness of someone terrified to lose his cushy throne.
I hope you had a good week. I did, and no thanks to Howard Stern. True, the New York Post reported that Stern hit a chic restaurant in NYC with a crew of A-listers, including Jimmy Kimmel, Jennifer Aniston, Jon Hamm, Justin Theroux, Jason Bateman. I was not invited. I guess because my first name doesn't begin with the letter J. Did you notice that?
Gutfeld hammered Stern for clinging to relevance with shock tactics that don't shock anyone anymore. The hair may still look wild, but the persona behind it is now all upkeep and no menace. It's like watching a legendary rock band still on tour, playing only half the old hits, and politely asking the crowd to keep the noise down. Stern's rebellious streak didn't fade. It was traded in for a gated community comfort zone where no real punches ever land. The roast kept circling back to Stern's obsession with his own legacy. Gutfeld pointed out that true legends never have to remind people they're legends. The constant reminders are proof the legend's slipping. No amount of Hollywood dinner parties can bring it back. Stern now talks about his career like a retired athlete who won a championship decades ago, but hasn't left the couch since, endlessly replaying his own highlights for anyone who'll listen.
It's weird because he criticizes Trump for dividing the country, and then he says he hates his supporters. So he's not learning from his own analysis. I think he might have turned into the thing he hated. He needs to go back and watch the movie Private Parts and focus on how he portrayed Don Imus, because he's kind of turned into Don Imus in a way. It's a mix of ego and resentment.
And then came the knife twist. Gutfeld zeroed in on the deep irony of Stern criticizing others for selling out, coming from the man who built his empire on raw, unfiltered rebellion, only to trade that very rebellion for a permanent seat at the polite society table. The critique rings hollow. The guy who once championed free speech now treats it as a dangerous liability. He's gone from breaking rules to enforcing them, from daring the censors to practically applying for the job himself. By the end, Gutfeld painted Stern as the ultimate media cautionary tale, living proof that no amount of past glory can save you if you stop taking risks. Once you start guarding your image instead of pushing boundaries, you're no longer a rebel. You're just another sanitized corporate brand with a microphone. And in Stern's case, it's a microphone that no longer shocks, startles, or challenges. It simply whispers safe platitudes into a shrinking echo chamber. In other words, Trump didn't cancel Howard Stern. Howard Stern quietly cancelled himself years ago. The only difference is that the world is finally catching up to that fact. And Greg didn't let up. He compared Stern's current show to a rock concert where the amps are unplugged and the lead singer pauses between songs to describe his gluten-free diet. Every segment feels like it's straining to recapture something long gone, like an aging athlete suiting up just to prove he's still cashing a paycheck, not because he can still win.
But imagine a conversation with that crew. So how's your health? 6 vaxes, 2 boosters, and an echinacea enema. And I only got COVID 4 times. Oh yeah, I did a triple vax and an IV booster trip, plus I gave Dr. Fauci a reach around. He was like, come on, Jimmy, don't worry about your sofa. I'm not a super spreader.
Gutfeld even joked that Stern's interviews now sound less like cutting-edge radio and more like a high school guidance counselor politely checking in on a nervous student's feelings. The energy, unpredictability, and occasional chaos that once made Howard a radio legend have completely vanished. In their place stands a host nervously steering every conversation between the guardrails, terrified of offending his A-list friends. Greg made it clear this isn't evolution, it's self-neutralization. And the moment Stern dives into politics, Greg said, it's like watching a man forget his own act. He's just reciting scripted talking points you've already heard 100 times on late-night TV, only without the self-awareness to recognize that he's become the very establishment he once mocked. The guy who used to torch sanctimonious celebrities now hands out velvet rope passes to his own private sanctimony lounge. Greg reminded everyone that Stern used to hammer guests for hiding behind corporate safety nets, yet now he shelters himself inside the same kind of carefully managed PR bubble. When Stern takes a political stance today, it's not bold, it's not dangerous, it's just the safest opinion in the room. It's rebellion by committee, rebellion by consensus. And Greg made it clear how downright pathetic that looks on someone who built an entire career by rejecting consensus in every form.
Are a lot like his listeners, especially if you think about his listeners of old, the blue-collar truck drivers, cops, salesmen, people on the road. It's like a divorce. In the divorce, he married to a younger wife. He left the whole thing behind, and now he's got new friends. Jackie the Joke Man, he can't compete with Jimmy Kimmel, so he's adopted this whole new lifestyle. He's traded in his old life for the Hamptons. He's got new friends. And he just he's ashamed of that world.
Greg even torched Stern's entire on-air style, calling it a hollow caricature of the old Howard, as if someone ran his 1990s persona through an HR compliance seminar and then shoved him back in front of a microphone. Stern still wears the black clothes and keeps the wild hair, but the edge is so dull now you could butter toast with it. The rebel image survives only as wardrobe, a costume for a character that no longer exists. As for Stern's claim that he's still telling it like it is, Greg laughed that off as telling it like the Hollywood invite list says you can. The man who once ridiculed the Oscars is now hosting the radio equivalent of a red carpet pre-show, where the only danger is someone tripping over a dress. Gutfeld's roast also hit Stern's sudden hypersensitivity to criticism. The old Howard would take shots and fire back twice as hard. The new Howard bristles like a cat hearing a vacuum cleaner. Greg quipped that Stern has gone from shock jock to shocked if you disagree with me. The once thick skin is gone, replaced by a PR-polished defensiveness, utterly unable to handle the kind of raw honesty Stern himself used to dish out daily without hesitation.
It's what Howard said later on his radio show. Quote, I really had an exhausting weekend. Emotionally, physically. For the first time in 2 years, I ventured out of the house. Now, maybe he's exaggerating. We all do that. In fact, the more successful you get in media, the more exhausting the easiest things become. This is true. I guess that explains Kilmeade's boundless energy.
Then Greg twisted the knife by going after Stern's desperate obsession with earning respect from the very industry he once lived to offend. He mocked Stern for confusing longevity with legacy, reminding everyone that merely sticking around isn't the same as staying great. If airtime alone made someone legendary, Greg quipped, the Home Shopping Network would be the greatest channel in television history. Greg didn't spare Stern's audience either. He roasted the diehards who defend him no matter what, comparing them to sports fans proudly wearing a traded player's jersey, pretending the game hasn't changed while ignoring the obvious reality. They're clinging to the brand name, not the content, and Greg made clear how sad that loyalty looks from the outside. When Stern leans on his "I've earned my place" rhetoric, Greg counters with a brutal reminder. Legacy isn't a lifetime membership. You have to keep earning it every day, And Stern hasn't been earning it for a long time. It's like bragging about being the fastest sprinter alive, Greg said, while refusing to even get off the couch.
They went woke. It's not a chicken or egg thing there. You know what order it came. So I call this BFR. It's blackface reparations. There's nothing in Stern's previous career that could withstand this modern witch hunt that he now embraces. So this is a form of restitution. Maybe he says, if I'm woke too, the crocodile will eat me last, but they always do eat. But I get it. He flipped from populist to elitist because now he's with elitists. He's living in the Hamptons. What would the Stern of now think of the Stern of before?
Greg even took aim at Stern's signature interviews, once the raw, unpredictable heartbeat of his entire show. Now they feel more like carefully choreographed publicity tours, the kind where every supposedly spontaneous answer has already been rehearsed to death in a green room. Gone is the electric thrill of watching Stern corner a guest into saying something they never intended to reveal. Instead, you get a softly lit, painfully polite conversation where the biggest bombshell is an actor sheepishly admitting they enjoy pineapple on pizza. And Greg wasn't shy about using Stern's own history as ammunition. He reminded everyone how Stern spent decades mocking other hosts for going soft, selling out, and playing it painfully safe. "You're the guy who told us never to pull punches," Greg said. "Now you're shadowboxing in a padded room." That betrayal of his original promise makes Stern's fall from edge even more glaring, and Greg refused to let him off the hook. By the time the roast wrapped up, the picture was crystal clear. Stern isn't the king of all media anymore. He's just the caretaker of media that's been carefully screened, sanitized, and approved.
Now remember, Stern used to throw bologna slices at strippers' butts. With accuracy, I might add. Now he's worried the possible leader of the free world can't handle his verbal foot rub. I wonder if he used to get this nervous for the strippers before he'd spank them on their bare asses with a dead fish. Here's Stern on anyone daring to poke a little fun at Kamala.
Even when I watch them on Saturday Night Live with the where they have Maya Rudolph playing you, I hate it. I don't want you being made fun of.
Oh my God.
There's too much at
His show isn't a radio revolution anymore. It feels more like an expensive museum exhibit showcasing what rebellion used to look like. People still line up, snap pictures, and pretend it's as dangerous as ever. But the velvet ropes and big no-touching sign make it clear it's all for show. Greg nailed it perfectly. Howard Stern is like a roller coaster that once made your stomach drop. Now, the brakes slam on halfway down the first hill, and a cheerful voice on the loudspeaker politely asks if everyone feels safe and comfortable. That's not rebellion. That's maintenance. And you can't maintain your way into greatness. You have to risk something real. Stern hasn't risked anything in years. So, when Trump finally pulled the plug, Greg argued it wasn't some shocking act of injustice. It was simply the official announcement of what anyone paying close attention already knew. Stern's act ended long before the show did. The roar that once made him untouchable has faded into a polite murmur, echoing inside a studio designed to cushion his ego instead of challenge it. In Greg's words, Stern didn't lose the crown because Trump cancelled his show. He lost it because, somewhere along the way, he traded the kingdom itself for a seat at the palace dining table, right beside the very people he once roasted mercilessly. And when you start dining with kings, you quietly stop being one yourself.